everyone, welcome back to another video. In today's video I'm going to focus on the autonomic nervous system, and this will include the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. So let's get started. So I think it's important that we know the difference between our central nervous system and our peripheral nervous system. Our central nervous system controls most functions of the body and our mind, and it consists of two parts. As you can see, I'm drawing them now, and these are the brain and the spinal cord. And then we have our peripheral nervous system, which basically consists of all the nerves and all the ganglia outside of the brain and the spinal cord. So just to recap, the central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord, and our peripheral nervous system consists of everything outside of the brain and spinal cord. So as you can tell, as I've said it quite a few times now, make sure you know the difference between your central and your peripheral nervous system. So the peripheral nervous system can be further split into the sensory and motor system, and the motor system can be further split into the autonomic nervous system and the somatic nervous system. The somatic nervous system is the part of the peripheral nervous system associated with all the voluntary control of your body. And this is done via the contraction of your skeletal muscles. So for example, when you contract your biceps, then this is done through your somatic nervous system. And then there's the autonomic nervous system, autonomic literally meaning occurring involuntarily or spontaneously. And it consists of the sympathetic nervous system, parasympathetic nervous system, and also the enteric nervous system. The sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems, they link your peripheral organs to the central nervous system, which is the brain and the spinal cord, as we said before, and are really crucial to maintain homeostasis. So I just want to go over the differences between the autonomic and the somatic nervous system. Let's start with the somatic nervous system. So, in the somatic nervous system, it only takes one motor neuron for it to reach its effector organ. And this motor neuron extends from the anterior grey horn of the spinal cord to the effector organ, which is usually a skeletal muscle. This single motor neuron is known as an alpha motor neuron, and what it does, it eventually leads to the contraction of the skeletal muscle. The skeletal muscle contracts because the alpha motor neuron secretes acetylcholine, which acts on nicotinic receptors located on the skeletal muscle, causing it to contract. We will go into detail about that in another video. However, in the autonomic nervous system, and I'm just talking about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system here, it takes two motor neurons for it to reach the effector organ. And this pathway consists of a preganglionic and postganglionic neurons. Now you might wonder, what is a ganglia? A ganglia are just a group of cell bodies located within the peripheral nervous system. So in the somatic system, it only takes one motor neuron to reach the effector organ. But in the autonomic nervous system, it takes two motor neurons to reach the effector organ. So make sure you know the differences between the somatic and the autonomic nervous system. Okay, so let's talk about the sympathetic nervous system now. The sympathetic nervous system is basically what happens in your fight or flight response. So for example, I'm terrified of dogs. Terrified. So if I see a dog, my initial reaction would either be, to fight it, which probably won't happen, or to fly, which is basically to run. And trust me, I run for the hills. So I've just drawn an angry dog here. As you can see, I changed my mind. It was quite happy at first, and then I was like, no, I'm going to make it angry because dogs are angry and they're out to eat me. Anyway, let's not get distracted. So yeah, whenever I see a dog, I run, and that's my flight response, and that's my sympathetic nervous system kicking in. So in the sympathetic nervous system, the cell bodies of the preganglionic neurons originate from the lateral horn of the grey matter in the thoracolumbar segment of the spinal cord, and that's basically the thoracic and the lumbar regions of the spinal cord. And this goes all the way from T1 to L2. So the sympathetic ganglia are found closer to the spinal cord in order for signals to be sent all over the body when it comes to fight or flight scenarios such as my dog scenario. In the sympathetic nervous system, the preganglionic motor neurons are much shorter than the postganglionic neurons. And this is because the preganglionic fibers are nearer to the spinal cord and the postganglionic fibers need to reach different organs in the body, so they are naturally longer. So the presynaptic ganglion secretes acetylcholine. If it secretes acetylcholine, then they're called cholinergic nerve fibers. This will then act on nicotinic receptors on the postganglionic neuron and then causing it to release noradrenaline. And as noradrenaline is released, then it's called an adrenergic neuron. However, the postganglionic neuron can also secrete acetylcholine again, and it's called a cholinergic nerve fiber again. However, this time it acts on muscarinic receptors instead of a nicotinic receptor. So, just to make life a bit more confusing, the only exception to the two neuron arrangement is the innervation of the adrenal medulla. Adrenal medulla is a neuroendocrine tissue and it's just composed of a postganglionic nerve fiber which secretes acetylcholine, and this acts on nicotinic receptors. So if the postganglionic nerve fiber secretes noradrenaline, then it can act on the target tissue such as the blood vessel, or if it releases acetylcholine and acts on the muscarinic receptor, then it can act on the target tissue such as the sweat glands, or like we said, if it's just one long postganglionic nerve fiber, then it will secrete acetylcholine which acts on nicotinic receptors on the adrenal medulla. So as we said before, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic systems provide a link between the central nervous system and peripheral organs. So here are just some examples of where the sympathetic nervous system acts, such as the heart, the eyes, lungs, the adrenal medulla, the liver, the GI tract, the bladder, and quite a few more. So we've said that the sympathetic nervous system is responsible for the fight or flight reaction. The parasympathetic nervous system is responsible for resting and digesting, so it's literally the opposite of the sympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic preganglionic fibers are longer and the postganglionic fibers are shorter. The reason the preganglionic fibers are longer is for it to reach or go into the effector organ, so they're sometimes known as intramural ganglia. In the parasympathetic nervous system, the neurons originate from the craniosacral area, and the reason it's called craniosacral is because it literally originates from the cranium and the sacrum. And remember, this is different from the sympathetic nervous system, which has thoracolumbar outflow. The cranial outflow consists of preganglionic fibers in certain cranial nerves, such as cranial nerve number 3, which is the oculomotor nerve, cranial nerve 7, which is the facial nerve, cranial nerve 9, which is the glossopharyngeal nerve, and cranial nerve 10, which is the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is the most important one. Parasympathetic fibers destined for the pelvic and abdominal viscera emerge as the sacral outflow from the spinal cord in a bundle of nerves known as the nerve erygentus. Wow, that was kind of hard to pronounce, but anyway. These fibers synapse in a group of scattered pelvic ganglia, originating from S2, S3, and S4. So it is called craniosacral outflow because the parasympathetic nervous system originates from cranial nerve 3, cranial nerve 7, cranial nerve 9, 10, and also S2, S3, and S4. Now let's summarize the differences between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. So the sympathetic nervous system originates from the thoracolumbar region, and the parasympathetic nervous system originates from the craniosacral region. The sympathetic nervous system lies close to the spinal cord for signals to be sent all over the body. The parasympathetic nervous system is close to the target organs, And of course, in the sympathetic nervous system, the preganglionic motor neurons are much shorter, and that's because they are nearer to the spinal cord, and the postganglionic neurons are longer to reach different organs in the body. And the parasympathetic nervous system, the preganglionic fibers are longer to reach or go into the effector organ, and the postganglionic neurons are shorter. And remember, sympathetic, fight or flight, parasympathetic, rest and digest. So yeah, learn the differences as they often creep up in exams. So that's the end of the video. If it has helped you, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you all for watching and see you next time.